Okay. So today we start a new chapter from a different location. And yes, I'm back. So happy to be back. And this chapter will be a chapter on the Cold War. So we just kind of finished up talking about World War II. And we're now going to start talking about the next war, the consequence, in part consequence of World War II, which of course was a consequence of World War I, which they're all connected here, of course. And well, let's get right into it. Look, what we know is that after World War II, it was clear that there were two countries that were more powerful than anyone else. And we're going to call these countries superpowers. The US and the USSR had become superpowers. They had become the two most powerful countries in the world, really replacing Britain and France, who had been probably the most powerful countries in the world post-World War I. And then, of course, Germany was maybe the most powerful country in the world, maybe Germany and Britain for the 50 years following the West German unification. So yeah, now we have two new countries who are powerhouses in the world. And at first, we're going to find out that the conflict was about the Eastern European countries. So here we have a map of blue countries that are democratic and capitalist, or more capitalist than communist. We know that there's probably no pure capitalisms out there. These governments almost all had elements of socialism in them. And the red countries are communist. And they were pretty extreme communists also. These were not countries that were just a teeny bit left of socialist. These were countries that were an extreme version of communism. The Soviet Union, China. And well, the first major conflict of the Cold War breaks out immediately following World War II. And it breaks out in the country of Greece. Now, Greece, this little teeny country here, tons of democratic history, right? Democracy started in Greece. So they had always been a little more Western leaning, say, than the other Eastern European countries. Here during this time period, your Poland and Czechoslovakia, Yugoslavia, Romania, Belarus, or not Belarus, but Bulgaria. And of course the Soviet Union, who had taken over Belarus and the Ukraine. But Greece was always a little more Western leaning. Heck, the Romans copied the Greek model of democracy, and arguably a lot of the new democracies that existed in Western Europe were copies of the old Roman model, which was a copy of the Greek model. So there's kind of this natural, come on over here to our side, Greece, that was going on during the period. And well, we're going to find out, this guy down. We're going to find out that, yeah, this is exactly what happens. Greece is in Eastern Europe, but they have a civil war, and the anti-communist side was being supported by the Brits. Now, remember, the Brits used to be powerhouses, but they couldn't do it anymore. Britain is going to take a backseat to the US on the global stage. And we're going to see that the US jumps in and offers help to Greece. In fact, starting in Greece, President Harry Truman, who had taken over for Roosevelt, decides that he's going to give any country that is threatened by communism money so that they could fight out communism. He'd give them weapons. He might give them military aid with some soldiers. So this is going to be called the Truman Doctrine. And this doctrine is going to lead US policy for the next 45 years. He was also worried about Turkey potentially being taken over. If you take a look here at this map, once again, real quickly, we're going to see that, Turkey is close to Russia, certainly closer to Russia than to Western Europe, but he really wanted to see Turkey stay democratic, kind of, capitalist, kind of, but not the extreme communist, right? And real quickly, here's this is what Greece looked like during World War II. And what you're going to find is that the Italians occupied part, Germany occupied part, Bulgaria occupied part. So when the Germans lost, the question, of course, is who's going to control Greece, right? And we're going to find out that Truman is successful, that Truman is able to help Greece, and Greece stays democratic. Greece stays mostly capitalist. And Turkey is going to also become more Western European friendly, say, than friendly with the Soviet Union, which is a big win for the US. They did not want Turkey to be Russia's friend. Next, a guy named George Marshall is going to come up with an idea, and he's going to say, let's rebuild Europe. And we'll give anyone money who wants help. Now, you got to pay us back, right? We're not just throwing money around, but we're going to give billions. It turned out to be $13 billion to help rebuild Europe. The Eastern European countries said, no, thank you. The satellite states, your Poland, Czechoslovakia, Romania, Bulgaria, Yugoslavia, they're not going to want this money, in part because the Soviets says they don't take that money. But if you look here at this chart, and I love charts, second only to maps, you're going to see that Britain takes a ton of money. So does France. West Germany, we're going to find out Germany is split in half, and the western half takes a ton of cash. Italy, the Netherlands, Greece, Austria, Belgium, and others. Yeah, the US just gives out a bunch of cash. And what they say basically is, look, just be our friend. Be capitalist. Have a democracy. We'll help you rebuild. And it does help create long-lasting friendships. In 1949, the USSR sees this, and they say, we're going to do the same thing. We're going to help rebuild Eastern European countries that we're now influencing or taking over with a program called Comecon. Only thing is they didn't have the money to lend out, so these Eastern European countries, they never rebuild. We're going to find out, and this is getting ahead, but the Soviet Union turns out to be in much better shape than the Eastern European countries, right? Russia rebuilds itself first and rebuilds the satellite states second, and they never really fully get rebuilt. It's going to be 45 years of tough living in these satellite states. I mentioned earlier, Germany gets divided, and it wasn't just like West Germany and East Germany. No, the Soviets came from the East. They took all the land that they had taken over, but the Western half, which is a little bigger, is divided into three: the French sector, the British sector, and the American sector. Also, right, so here, I'm sorry, this is actually that was Berlin. Berlin itself is divided into four also, but I get ahead of myself. Here is the map of Germany after the war. This is the British sector, the French sector, the American sector, and East Germany. And look, Berlin is in the middle of the east side. So here we have a city surrounded by East Germany, where there's actually going to be areas of Berlin itself, as we saw on this map, that are controlled by the West. So it's a really weird situation. It's going to lead to the situation we're going to discuss here in a second. So let's just go follow the slide for a second. The capital city of Germany had always been Berlin. It was located deep in the Soviet side of Germany, which is now going to be called East Germany. The Soviets did not want the West to create West Berlin or West Germany, but specifically they didn't want West Berlin, okay, because what what does that mean, right? Now you're going to be influential in the middle of my country that I'm influencing. And there was one road, okay, that went back and forth between Hanover, Germany, and Berlin. And the Soviets, at first, they're going to cut off this road. They're going to go, look, we're not going to let you guys be influential in West Berlin. So we're going to cut off the road, and we're just going to make it so we're going to starve you out. So you have no supplies, and eventually those people will just leave. Well, Truman said no. And Truman started what's called the Berlin Airlift. So you can see that there were hundreds of airplanes each day being flown in and out of Berlin, bringing supplies. When I say supplies, I'm talking about food, right? I'm talking about just the basics of life. But every day for a year, the British and the US are going to fly supplies for 10 months, 200,000 flights total, bringing whatever they needed in West Berlin to survive in, so that West Berlin could continue to be influenced by the West. Eventually, in 1949, the Soviets are going to give in. They're going to allow trains and trucks to drop off supplies in Berlin. This is called the Berlin Airlift. But this just kind of goes to show the early tension in between the two countries and who's going to be influential where. In September 1949, a West German country is officially created. West German capital is going to be right here. Let's take a look at the city of Bonn. So it's way over here near the west side of West Berlin, near Belgium and France. So just in case, there's always a little space there. Berlin, East Berlin stays the capital of East Germany, although West Berlin still just kind of sits there. Capitalist, right? Very Western influenced. Again, here's the picture of the map. And I mean, France has just kind of a little area of influence, but it is on their border. It's this area down here on the French border. And, you know, although they didn't really fight the war, they were still just historic buddies with the Germans or with the British and the Americans, at least for the last 100 years. And they decided they would get a piece of the pie. Less than a month later, the USSR creates this area called East Berlin, and they make, or East Germany, and they make Berlin the capital. Then we're going to start to see alliances form. We know that alliances, bad word, right? This reminds me of World War I. No, right? World War II had alliances. Let's not do that. It's going to happen. And we're going to see there's the North Atlantic Treaty Organization is the first one formed, or NATO. Still exists, incredibly important and influential. And it starts off here, and let's take a look, with these blue countries, the dark blue countries, the original members, Iceland, Norway, Britain, Portugal, Spain, France, Italy, Belgium, Norway, Belgium, Netherlands, Denmark, West Germany. And look, Greece and Turkey, right? We talked about that earlier. Eventually, we're going to see other countries get added in. But the very, very beginning countries were these dark blue countries you see here. And the United States and Canada, okay? North Atlantic, across the ocean on the other side. Now, we're going to see that in 1955, a few years later, USSR says we'll do the same. We'll create the Warsaw Pact. And this will be Albania, Bulgaria, Czechoslovakia, East Germany, Hungary, Poland, and Romania. Let's take a look at it on the map. What are we talking about? We're talking about Hungary, Bulgaria, Romania over here, Poland, Czechoslovakia, East Germany, and of course, the Soviet Union, right? Now we're going to see other smaller military alliances break out. We're going to see I'm getting ahead of myself here, but China is going to turn communist. They're going to buddy up with the Soviet Union. So is North Korea, and the US kind of takes over South Korea, and we have a war. We'll get there. The British and the US decide they're going to become friendly here in Asia, in South Asia. They get a friendship with Pakistan, Thailand, Australia, and New Zealand, of course, English, right? And then we call this SEATCO. And then in the Middle East, Turkey, Iraq, Iran, Pakistan also form a treaty here with the U.S. and Britain. So really the U.S. and Britain have like more partnerships in the early part of this war. I mean, it looks like they're clearly more powerful, right? Bigger alliances, more land. This isn't going to be a real rivalry, is it? Until this happens. In 1949, Americans, or 1949, the Soviet Union tests its first atomic bomb. And the US says, oh my gosh, I thought only we had it. We could bully anyone if we were the only people with the atomic bomb. And now they have it, our great rival. How did they get it? And they end up blaming this couple, these Americans, by the name of Julius and Ethel Rosenberg. And they believe that these people who did, in fact, work with nuclear weapons and did, in fact, have access to the secrets, they decided that, yeah, these people were the ones who sold us out. They gave the secrets to the Soviet Union. That's why Russia has their nuclear bomb, is because these people gave up our secrets, and they were executed. Yeah, even the wife was executed, which is unheard of in 1953. It's still unheard of. Very few women have been executed in our country's history, but it was kind of, let's make an example of them. And all of a sudden now that the Soviet Union, has the atomic bomb, we begin what's called the arms race. And basically they end up saying like, hey, let's just have more weapons than each other. And I'm getting ahead of myself, and I'll circle back around, but at some point they have like, both countries have like 20 overkill power, like in the 70s or 60s. And basically that means they could blow up the entire world 20 times, right? Like, why would you need that? It makes no sense. And then we've been cutting back on nuclear bombs, but don't think that there aren't, these countries, the US and Soviet Union and others today, China, and Britain, and France, and Pakistan, and North Korea, and Israel. These countries, they have nuclear bombs that could, there's nuclear submarines out there that could wipe out like huge chunks of the world, just one submarine. It's ridiculous. So they build up these weapons, and we have this arms race now between the two superpowers, before all the other countries got nuclear bombs. In the 1950s, the US and Soviets had developed intercontinental ballistic missiles, mostly from Germany. They had grabbed German scientists, and rocket scientists, because I discussed this earlier. Germany was ahead of the rest of the world with rocket technology. And they said, hey, teach us, how you build those rockets. We'll move you in. We'll get you. We'll make you rich, and you don't have to live in a bombed out country anymore. And they do. And both the U.S. and the Soviet Union grab as many scientists as possible, and they start working on missiles that could be launched from America and land in the Soviet Union. This is kind of the initial idea, right? I don't want to have to fly my planes over. I want to be able to launch them from here and just have them and over there. Of course, we know this is very common today. So they build up as many of these missiles as possible. There's missile silos across the United States with nuclear weapons, which are just sitting there, never been used, billions of dollars upkeep, different story for a different day. And this was one way of keeping the other side from attacking them. It's called mutually assured destruction, right? Mad. You're mad for doing this. And I don't mean mad like angry. I mean like, you're crazy, people. Sorry. I need to stop. Mutually assured destruction. You don't blow me up and destroy everything. I won't blow you up and destroy everything. That'll make us safe. In 1957, the Soviets do something unexpected. They launch one of these rockets into outer space, and they release a satellite called Sputnik that orbits the world, and the whole world sees it. And now the Soviets were the first to do it. And for the first 10 years, everyone kind of thought the US was like leader here in the Cold War, and the Soviets were not really that big a deal. And now they beat us. What is this? Are they more advanced than us? Many people thought that the Soviets just had better missiles and better rockets. Oh my gosh, are we losing? It was a symbolic thing more than anything. We're going to find out that the Soviets are the first to do a lot of this kind of stuff. They're the first to send a monkey into outer space, and then it comes back and parachute goes off. They take their ship out there, and there's a live monkey. Turtles were sent into space. A lot of things before humans. Then the first human was Russian, orbited the Earth. People were freaking out in America, like, oh my gosh, we're falling behind. And America kind of does all this stuff just months or years later. And now it looks bad, although really, looking back historically, we say they were never really equal to with us. It was a scary moment. And people in America start like building nuclear bunkers in their backyard just in case a nuclear bomb hits. They do drills like what you in school, like what do you do if nuclear bomb hits? Here's what you do. Like fire drills, or like we have live shooter drills nowadays. How was that even a thing? I did not have live shooter drills when I was young, but I know how it's a thing because it actually happens. Right? It's so horrible. Anyways, in 1960, President Kennedy says, "Look, we're going to send a man to the moon." And no one really thought, 61, no one really thought that, not really though, how are you going to do that? And in summer of 1969, it happens. The U.S. is the first country to send a man to the moon, and we send many men to the moon, unless you believe the conspiracy theorists, which I don't teach in my class. The Soviet Union had failure after failure in their attempt to get to the moon. And some people would say that means we won. Other people would say that means it was a tie, because the Soviets did everything else first, and then we did this one thing first. Although I guess that's the big thing. Is it the big thing? Well, we also are the first to now be in Mars, which is kind of a big thing. Is there going to be a moon hotel? We have like space tourism now. There's all sorts of crazy stuff. And the U.S. is clearly the leader in this stuff nowadays, but back then it was pretty even. Also around the city of Berlin, they decided, let's build a wall around the western part of the city, because it was crazy. The western part of the city was so much more successful than the eastern part of the city. So you know, first off, I mean, imagine if like the 405, a big old wall gets built along the 405, and then everyone on that side of the 405, we can't talk to anymore. We can't see them. We can't talk to them. We miss them, maybe on the phone, but we can't talk to them in person. We can't cross the wall, right? There were guards on that side of the 405 keeping them from coming here. And then all of a sudden we got crazy. Look, my family lives in Burbank. It would be like, can't talk to your family anymore. North Hollywood area, that's where I grew up. But then, you know, we're all rich. We got like nice stuff, buildings, lights. And over there, they're poor on the other side of the wall in the East Valley. And that's kind of what happened to the city of Berlin. Check it out if you ever get a chance. Go up to the Reagan Library. I personally love the Reagan Library. They have a chunk of the wall. It's really tall. It's really hard to imagine to get over. And then there's like all kinds of graffiti on like the western side of the wall. But the eastern side, it's empty. Because if you tried to get through that wall, they would kill you. There were guard towers, barbed wire, dog runs. Because people would try to escape the east, make it over there, and then they could have the comforts. But basically, the city of West Berlin is walled off during this period, starting in 1955, or maybe starting in 1961. But it becomes bigger and bigger year by year, and it just becomes a symbol of the Cold War. And it's not until 1989 when they're torn down. I was 14. I remember when it happened. It was a huge deal, but I was also only 14. So I was kind of like more concerned with basketball and skateboarding. Yeah, this wall was very, very symbolic of of the Cold War, of the fact that Europe had been split in half, and now this great city has been split in half, and we stayed that way for the 45 years.